my science
guest
fiction.
for a month.
Okay, that works.
I have to tell you that my son decided that he needed to start following baseball, so he likes the Ravens. So the poor for football. So the poor boy picked the Orioles for his American team. I was like,
Hello, everybody. I'd like to welcome you. Yeah, that's right. I have this is me projecting my voice.
yeah, right.
Marine command voice.
That's right. It's my Marine command voice. Welcome to our panel on co-writing. We've got a very experienced group of panelists right here. And so before we actually get into the panel itself, I would like everybody each of the panelists to introduce themselves and why they are here. And we'll start on the far end with Kate.
So I am Kate Pickford. I am a former screenwriter, script doctor, ghostwriter, until I worked out that I could make more money writing my own stuff. So then I shifted from doing that and developmental editing into writing in my own universe. And in the last couple of years, I have been co-writing with a team of 30 writers who I have split into several groups who are writing post-apoc with me. And I am co-writing a series for my publisher for Vela, which is a steamy rom-com, which is entirely different. So that's who I am.
Hey, I'm Chris Kennedy. I'm woohoo! President of Chris Kennedy Publishing. I'm also an author. Not just the president of the Hair Club. I'm a member too. I've got about 40 books of my own that I've written, of which about 15 are co-writes. So I've written with a number of people in the Four Horsemen universe. I've written with David Weber in Into the Light. So I've written, I think, with 5 or 6 other people. So I've seen and done co-writes a number of different ways.
Hi, I'm Jay and Chaney, President and CEO of Variant Publications. We mostly do sci-fi, space opera, military sci-fi, that sort of thing. Jonathan here is one of our collaborators. We've published over 120 individual books across, I think it's like 13, 14 series. Molly could tell me better. She's one of our employees, the lore master of our main universe, and also a writer herself.
I'm David Weber, and the very first novel that I sold actually was a collaboration with Steve White. I have no idea how many collaborations over the years. Yeah, the whole pile, whole big bunch. Like Chris says, I'm working with him now. Richard Fox, who many of you I'm sure know. Jacob Holo, who is back in my neck of the woods in Greenville. Jane Lindskold. Tim Zahn, Tom Pope, all of those I have current ongoing collaborative projects with.
And I'm Jonathan Brazee, yay, retired Marine Colonel, now full-time writer and provider for 2.5-year-old twin girls, which you may have seen running around here. I've got about 80 some odd titles. Just coincidentally, during this week, probably I'll go over $1 million in revenue, in royalties, and of that, 17% is with co-writing. So it's been a fairly significant chunk of my writing income. So let's begin. Why co-writing? I mean, obviously, some people think it's a good idea. Some people don't think it's a good idea. You're splitting the revenue that brings in or whatever. So why co-writing? And we'll start on this side this time with David.
All right, the one absolute reason to never co-write is to increase output. Okay, that's where literary sharecropping comes in. And that is always bad. It is destructive for both writers, and what you produce is usually, might be high quality Drek, but it's still Drek. Okay? If you're going to co-write, then you need to co-write. It needs to be a joint effort. There may be a senior partner, there may be a junior partner, but both of you need to be involved in the book. And the only reasons that I will do collaborations are, number one, because it's a story that I don't have time to tell by myself, that I think the other writer is the right person to help me tell that story in the time that I've got available. Number two, it's somebody that I think I can learn from or teach in the process. Number three, the final work will be different from what either of us would have done alone, but at least as good as either of us would have done alone. If those criteria can't be met, then I'm not interested in doing a co-writing project with anyone. And if the partners in a project are fair with each other, if they're honest with each other, more often than not, those criteria can be met. Okay? I've only had one occasion that I can think of when they absolutely weren't, and I was left to clean up the mess.
So why co-authoring? Initially for me, it was out of necessity because I had a successful series, the Renegade Star series, and I wanted to expand it. And I was in the process of writing the main series, and I needed some help to get other books out, other stories in that universe. So we started, that's how Molly came in, that's how Scott Moon came in. And over time, we developed about 54 entries in that universe. But after a while, when you're in this business long enough, you start to just get ideas. And after that point, I was like, I'm only one person. I only have two hands. I can only type so fast. So I started collaborating on other ideas outside of that universe. So at that point, it just became, how many series we can have that are successful and hits and, that the market wants, and who are the best people to assist in writing those stories. That's why I started working with John here. He is a ex-colonel.
Never ex-Marine.
No, never ex-Marine, ex-colonel. Former Marine colonel, combat veteran. And so he brought that expertise into a military sci-fi series called Sentenced to War, which gets praised a lot for its combat accuracy. So I'd say that was a successful collaboration. So I look for people like that to collaborate with who are going to elevate me, and then I can elevate them.
And I think that's important. A number of the collaborations I've done have been where I was the senior author, and it was either to help somebody learn the universe a little better or to provide something that they didn't have. I had 20 years as a naval aviator, so I bring that kind of experience to the table and am able to speak aviation and get the military stuff right with somebody that may not have had that background. And it makes the whole project better for it because they were bringing a great story. They had some great ideas, but they weren't able to get it into the universe or do the military stuff right. In one case, it was somebody that is blind and had never seen what zero gravity looked like, so it was awfully hard for him to describe. So things like that. Collaborations are great when you're missing a piece of experience. They're also great teaching tools to get that knowledge to somebody that didn't have it.
So, in my experience as a ghostwriter, very often that's collaborative. It can be anything from a writer giving you notes that are 10 pages of notes that have expanded their universe to 5 lines of an outline for a 3-book series that you're going to run with. And you get to one of the reasons that I ghost wrote, in addition to my misbelief, one of the reasons that I ghost wrote was you get to learn other genres, and you've got somebody who is already there and an expert in that genre, and you get them to, if they're good, and you know how to steer them, you get to learn from them because they can course correct when you're off course. And then when you get to know it well enough, then you get to be the more senior writer. And I was talking with my co-writer today. One of the things that we love about writing into each other's chapters, we both bring different areas of expertise. And we're writing in our series has 2 POVs. And we took a POV each, but we write into each other's chapters every week. And one of the most exciting things is to have somebody who is as invested in your universe as you are. Oh, good Lord. So to have somebody, you know, when you send things off to an editor or a developmental editor or your beta readers, they might be as interested as you, but you've always got that niggling voice in the back of your head. I've got to get away from myself, apparently. I've got feedback on me. You've got that, you know, do they really know what you're getting at? But with a co-writer, where you're talking all the time about what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to get your readers to experience on the page, that means that no matter what you're doing, when the next chapter comes in, because we go chapter by chapter, the next chapter comes in, you run to your lappy so you can read the next thing that's coming in. And it's enormously energizing. You write faster, you write better, you write deeper, and you've got reverb.
I'd like to add one thing. I sold my first novel 40 years ago this month. And yeah, well, trust me, when I realized how long it had been, clapping was not what I was doing. You know.
Don't say you
But-
grew up reading him. He doesn't like
Yeah, it's like, don't tell me that. But one of the people I feel most blessed to have known because of my writing was Roger Zelazny. Okay? Roger was one of the people who helped me to understand that this is not a zero-sum game. My success does not depend upon your failure. Okay? And there comes a point at which you have a responsibility to do some paying ahead. And so I will do collaborations with writers who I think have the potential to become really, really good, to give them kind of a leg up for their first few ventures into the publishing game. Now, of course, I'm coming at this from the position of someone who's always been traditionally published because there was no other avenue when I was coming along 40 years ago. Okay, I mean, Honor Harrington was born the year before Al Gore invented the internet. Okay, that's how long I've been doing this. And so you guys are in a different place from me in a lot of ways, but I strongly suspect that the principles of storytelling haven't changed a lot.
Okay, those are some of the reasons. Well, actually, it was supposed to be reasons to co-write and a few not to co-write, which are just as important. But let's go more specifically into some of the pros and cons. We'll start with the pros. What are some of the specific advantages in co-writing? And that could be from the whole gamut, from the creation to the publication. And this time we'll start with Jeff.
I would say when you're doing this on your own at first, you have your process that works for you. You have your voice and your editing process and all that stuff. When you're collaborating, I know with me, we went through, I knew just early on with Scott, because he was one of the first guys that we worked with, and that process, learning the other person's voice, that can take a lot of work and time. Developing new processes that you need to collaborate with, like learning how to balance an editor, and now instead of a twosome, it's a threesome, and you guys are just going back and forth constantly and reading and editing. I think probably 6-7 drafts, early on. But once you streamline all that, you do it enough times. I mean, you get so used to it. It's quick and easy. 1 or 2 drafts. But I think that's the biggest con for me. And then one of the biggest pros is, like I said earlier, just elevating each other's voice. learning what you're deficient in. I know early on for me, combat was one of those things. And if you're writing sci-fi, you need to know that, intimately. So
That's
working
because he's Air Force.
yeah. Right. I never saw combat. Yeah.
There we go.
I was one of those guys in the middle of in that air-conditioned tent in the middle of the base fixing computers. So yeah, I can do golf well. No, not even that. No. Halo, I can do that. Yeah. But yeah, so I would say, learning what you are deficient in. Working with Scott, he is, he's an acting police captain, and or is it sergeant? Lieutenant.
Oh, one of them.
Yeah, totally different rank structure. Yeah. So working with Scott,
He doesn't understand ranks. He was in the Air Force.
yeah, exactly. No, working with Scott, I mean, learning that side of like what it is to be a cop. Like we wrote, not he and I, but a different collaborator and I worked on a series about cops on a space station. And after knowing Scott for like 2 years prior to that, I came into that collaboration process with knowledge that I picked up from working with Scott. So, and our next series will involve a cop, So, I think when you work with enough people, you just pick up all this knowledge from their lives that improves your own writing and your own collaborations. So it's all very valuable, and you come into it with multiple perspectives across different fields and all these different careers that you could never accomplish on your own.
I think for me, the two biggest pros are making yourself better and making the story better. And one thing I learned from David, I always thought that I was a pretty hard worker. We started writing, and we got to, we sat down, talked about what we were going to do for the book, and then he developed about a 250,000 word document for what we were going to do. And I was like, oh my God, you wrote 2 books to write the book. But that's, that's his work ethic, and he worked harder than I did, as we were getting ready for this. And I was like, oh my God, I need to work harder. I need to push myself. I need to do more. I need to be more involved. I need, that's okay. I get that. That's fine. But so working with David made me a better writer, and I know that many times I write a lot with Mark Wandry, and we have different skill sets, and we make each other better because we bring the things to fill out the other. And a lot of times I'll do something, and actually with David too. Hey, what if I do this? Oh, if you do that, then I can do this. And you get going back and forth with each other, and you make the story a lot better because you come up with things you hadn't thought of, and it vastly improves the story.
Any good collaboration is synergistic.
Do you want to use this?
I don't know. Let's check the reverb. So I agree with everything that I heard on the panel. I would also say that one of the pros is you learn how to get your ego off the page, which means, especially when you're starting, I'm seeing a lot of pros here, but I don't know who's watching from home. But when you're first starting, there is a lot of ego and a lot of attachment, and the whole kill your babies things feels really, really terrible. But once you've been working with somebody else and you see what they bring to the page, and you see what they can do for your work, and you see how you can elevate your own work, then it gets much, much easier to just axe whatever you need to axe, because you started riffing on something and you thought you were being really funny, and you're in the middle of a tragic scene, and what the fuck are you doing? Really get rid of it. Sorry. In terms of, so pros, there are lots and lots of pros. I do this a lot. I do this with a lot of people. I really like it. I'll talk quietly. Dear God in heaven. Cons. Oh, someone's going to come and tell me off. Great.
Not yet.
You did say pros and cons.
Jeff hit some cons.
Yeah.
He's Air Force once again.
Yeah.
That explains it.
It's all right. We can come back around.
We'll come on. Go ahead. Go to your cons.
So if you write with somebody who has not gotten their ego off the page, over the years I've had writers who have told me after I've finished a book and have been paid for it and paid very well, that they were going to trash it or that they were going to price it so high nobody would buy it, and it was all a personality thing that just went wrong at the end. And if you are dealing with somebody who is bringing their ego into the room and onto the page, and you haven't had those conversations about get you out and put the work first, then you end up handling these egos. And the big project that I've had going on for the last 18 months, there have been some massive personalities in the room, and we've had these combos of plotters, plantsers, and pantsers, and when they are in the room together and they are talking different languages, you can bet your bottom dollar someone is going to have a meltdown. I'm not saying it's always the plotter, but it's always the plotter.
David?
Well, I've already, I think, covered most of the pros from my perspective. I would add the wonderful degree of synergy when your strengths interlock with the other writers, where you're, for example, with Jacob Holo. Jacob is an engineer. He's got a really strong technical background. He has much less background in history and the social sciences. So we are almost a perfect match in terms of the strengths that we bring to the process. I've never really had a problem with ego involvement from either side when you get into the cons, okay? I have had a couple of projects. I had one which shall remain nameless, in which I had to basically go in and clean up the mess, and there was never going to be another collaboration with that author. Okay, usually when I've had a problem in a collaboration, it's been because of outside circumstances that have intervened. Eric Flint and I just released To End in Fire. For various health reasons, Eric was 8 months late getting me the manuscript, and because we were advancing beyond where the history and the Honorverse had advanced to for the first time in a collaboration, he was having to break ground, and he was having to use a lot of my solo characters he'd never used before and who he hadn't properly internalized. And so the manuscript was unworkable as it was handed to me, and we handed in the last portion of the manuscript about 5.5 weeks before the book shipped. Okay, and for those of you who have dealt with traditional publishing at all, you understand that everybody involved was dead when we got done doing that. That was a case of a collaboration that the final book is damn good, don't get me wrong. As a project, it worked. As a process, it sucked, but it wasn't really anybody's fault, okay? And I've never really had that as an issue in a collaboration. It may be because of who I picked to collaborate with. It may be because of the fact that we had a very clear understanding going in as to how this was going to be handled, you know, et cetera. I don't know. But I have to say that most of the horror stories that I've heard about collaborations have not really darkened my orbit a lot. There's been, like I say, that one exception.
So you always go into these things with the best of intentions, and you know, whether it's you want to work with that person because they're a friend or because you like their books or what have you, and then you get behind the scenes and you get to know that person from a creative viewpoint, from a collaborative viewpoint, and they're a totally different person. Because, you know, ego, like she said earlier, ego gets the best of us many, many times. And I've worked with a lot of collaborators at this point, and we have had to scrap several books and just taken the hit, the financial hit. Covers were drawn up and made. Editing had been done multiple times, and you got to pay for every one of those passes, and it's a wash. But that's the cost of the job if you get into this. If you are the lead writer, if you're the one that's fronting all the cost, if that's the agreement you have to go into it accepting that some of these things might happen. And that even though that person is a friend, they may not necessarily have what it takes, or their voice may not be similar enough to match yours. They may not want to adhere to the tropes that you're going for. They may not like the editing. They may not like the cover designs. And just, whatever little nitpicky thing that you can think of, we've probably gone through it. And that sucks because you put in all these hours and all this time. But when it works, it really works. And then you strike gold. And those instances, and as you go along, you get better at it. You get better at picking the winners, because that becomes the job. Is like finding those people that you want to have in your corner, like John here, or Scott, or Molly. And over the years, we've found our tribe of people, and they've only made us better.
Do your con.
Okay, cons. The ego thing is a con, and sometimes it's hard to let go of your thing. I have this great idea, but he wants to go a different way, or she wants to go a different way, but it's my great idea, and I didn't get to use. Oh well, it's sometimes you have to sacrifice for the greater good. One thing that can be difficult is kind of like David was saying, timing. Depending on how you're doing the collaboration, whether you're, I'm doing this chapter, you're doing the next, and you're trading off, you hopefully have the schedules where they can do their part and get it back to you so you're not left hanging. Because, you want to do your part, you want to get it done, but if you're counting on somebody else to do their part first, are you waiting? Are you working on something else? What are you doing in the interim to keep yourself busy and engaged in it? And sometimes it can be hard to stay involved when the partner is not holding up their end.
I think I answered this one.
Yeah. Okay. One of the questions I get when people talking about co-writing is, how do you co-write? What's the distribution of tasks? What's this thing called a lead writer or an alpha writer and a Bravo writer or whatever? So we have 4 panelists who have done either themselves or each one differently, all different ways of co-writing. So like each one of you, and we're starting with Chris on this, of different forms of co-writing and how you've done it, just to give people an idea of what's possible.
Yeah, there are probably as many ways to do it as there are people who are doing it. There have been times where we've had an outline from the start where, here's what's going on, and you're going to do this chapter and this chapter, and I'm going to do that and that. So as you're going along, who's responsible for what. When I'm writing with Mark Wandry, I'm writing during the day and he's writing at night, and we're writing in the same spot of the book. I advance my character, he advances his, and we just keep going back and forth. It drives him crazy when I jump about 6 chapters ahead because I had a great idea that I needed to put in, and then we have to connect the dots to get from where we are to where that is. But it works out, and it's just a matter of whether you're doing the plotter thing or the pantser thing, and either can work. You just have to know what you're getting into ahead of time.
Kate.
Can I remember the question? The question is...
Different ways that you've co-written. You said you had 30 people.
Yes.
How does that work?
So I have 30 people. I divided them into 3 teams, and they are co-writing in those teams. I am the lead writer. I jokingly say I'm God, but what I mean is I'm God. And I have the final say with everything. They plot, so this is post-apoc, and they plot together. But we had to make a decision right at the beginning, so everyone was on the same page. And this is a charity gig where we were writing 30 books to raise money for my sister-in-law's mother who's losing her house. And long story. And so we've got 30 writers to volunteer their time for 18 months. And they plot together, and I had to decide, this is how we're going to plot. So I picked the hero's journey, and I created a plotting sheet that they can work through. And as I'm a big fan of Lisa Cron's Story Genius, I threw in the idea of misbelief just to make it exciting for us. So they all had to work on their characters' misbelief. And so we did a lot of prep to get started. And then they went through editing. Probably in the beginning, those first chapters got something like 6, 7, 8 rounds of edits. And now it goes to their co-writers. They all know what we're writing in close third. Everyone's writing in close third. They understand the rules that I have laid down that I want them to follow so that we can get the voices closer together. And if they don't do it now, we're far enough along in, I just rewrite into their chapters, and it goes back to them either with notes from me that say fix this, this, and this, or I fix it and then it's KP final. It's good to be God.
Okay, David?
I have never collaborated with 2 authors the same way in my entire life. Okay, I mean, we're different people. There are different processes. The only key point that really needs to be decided for me going into a collaboration is whose sandbox are we playing in? If I'm writing in 1632, we're playing in Eric's sandbox. I'm going to be doing some co-writing with Chuck Gannon sitting back there hiding in the back of the room. We'll be playing in his sandbox, and if they come and write in the honor verse, then they're playing in my sandbox. And that being the case, one of us is that senior person is responsible for maintaining a novel that works within that universe. That doesn't mean it has to be the same voice as all the other novels in that universe. It's a collaboration. And for me, that's always been a comfortable working relationship. Even with the one exception that I had to go back and clean up from. And I personally think that it's a mistake to over-organize when you're doing a collaboration. Now, that's maybe because that's my style. I don't know. But it seems to me that you're going to maintain more of the spontaneity that is the key to making the story work when when the storytelling is less constrained by the process of producing the work. That has always been the case for me as an individual, and it may be that that's why it's also been my experience as a collaborator. But I just throw that out for what it's worth.
I've never had much luck or enjoyment with the back and forth. You know, going like you write a chapter, I'll write a chapter, or you write this POV and I'll write this POV. From my experience, it tends to slow the process down significantly, which in some cases is a good thing because that's what you're going for. But for me personally, I tend to prefer the lead and secondary writer philosophy of co-writing, which would be one person writes the entire first draft, maybe with a few gaps, you know, for things that they're not familiar with, like certain combat scenes or what have you, or the science or whatever it is. And then the second person comes in and, you know, fills in all the holes or fixes any issues that might come up. Does the final edit, yeah. So typically now that's sort of our process. We have, you know, like John writes his series. He does the entire first pass, and same thing with Scott. So that seems to work for us really well. But, yeah.
Okay, and we're going to end up, before we open up for a couple questions, so get those ready if you have them. If you can give us, each one of you can give us a personal look at either a horror story or something that you're really proud of in a collaboration. Give an example, if you have one. If not, when you're done, we'll open it up for questions.
I had somebody turn a book in one time, twice in a row actually, and we only did 2 books for this reason, but they didn't want to touch the book or hear anything about anything afterwards, and it was a very problematic manuscript. So Molly and I had to go in there and completely rewrite the last third of that book both times in about 36 hours. So that was a lot of work, and we didn't get much sleep. But we made it happen, and then we never worked with that person again. So, yeah, that's the worst horror story I have.
Naming no names. The biggest problem, the worst collaborative experience that I had, the book worked in the end, but I was supposed to write about 10,000 words, and we were shooting for about 10 to 15. We were shooting for about 100,000. And I got roughly 70,000 words and discovered that time scales had been shifted in writing the book, distance scales had been shifted in writing it, there was no combat in it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The final manuscript was 142,000 words long, and I threw out 10,000 of the words that I'd been given. Okay? Now, compared to that, the problems we had with To End in Fire were minute. Okay? I've had a lot of success stories. The March Up Country series with John Ringo springs to mind. And I think that what's his name down here? The ex-Navy guy, Chris, yes, I do that. I think that that Into the Light worked really well coming off of Out of the Dark. I have to admit, though, that right this minute, sort of the crown jewel of my collaborators is Jacob Hollow on the Gordian Protocol. Sorry, Chris. Sorry. But, okay, Jacob is an incredibly fast learner, okay? But what's even more important is the way that our personalities and our background knowledge mesh. Okay, we really like each. I like Chris too, but it's okay. Thank you, Chris. But given the nature, especially of the stories that Jacob and I are writing, okay, with me to handle the history and the social aspects and him to handle the science, as long as I can keep him from killing entire universes, okay, we're good. And I've told him he has to put off the book in which he kills 3 galaxies, okay? But that's been pushed a little down the road.
Okay, Chris, I think we're a little tighter on time than I
Yeah,
thought.
definitely the success was writing with David in going through it. For those of you that haven't done TradPub, there are about 18 different editing passes, and they send it back to you, and you have to read it again, and they do that again and again and again. Every single time I read that book, I liked it more. And that's, the really the epitome of why you do it. That's, to me, was, best book ever that I was part of. So that was really cool. The horror story is having to completely, it was going to be a collaboration. It became a complete co-write or rewrite, where something got turned in, and it's like, okay, you have now officially broken every single rule in this universe. Every bit of canon that's ever been established, you violated, and now I have to fix it.
So I think I told you my horror story already accidentally. Probably one of my proudest moments was my wife and I used to make films. If you want to flush money down the toilet, definitely make films. And she had a colleague who had a lot of footage which would best be described as a cluster foxtrot. And she came to us, a lot of it was on the cutting room floor, and we storyboarded it and we put it back together again, and it won an Oscar.
That's a pretty good, pretty good success story. I think we ran out of time, so I'm sorry I didn't open it up for questions. But if you see any of the panelists out there, I'm going to tell you, just go up to them and ask your questions. Thank you so much.
You guys.
And you're welcome.
Actually, I'm going to go crash for an hour or so. That's one reason I just want to say hi, Bill Webb. Hello. Good to meet you. Yeah, you too.
You guys talked.